at Alderson Broaddus, there were African American students there, and a group of us decided to go from that campus to uh, Elkins to the Forest Festival. And to me, at least back then, I thought the Forest Festival was a big deal because it turns out that presidents actually came to that festival. And I actually had the opportunity to shake hands with Richard Nixon. Okay.
Mm.
But all that being said, I remember and at that time, I don't think any of the students that I was with, I'm sure actually it was the case that we had a car, and I don't know how far it is from Philippi to Elkins, but it seems far to me even in a car, but I haven't been that route in quite some time. But on foot, I'm sure it is farther. So after we decided to leave, we started to walk back to campus, which is a good distance, and we're walking on the roadway. And we were between Elkins and Bealington. Okay. And we're walking on the road, and we're actually on the right side of the road. You're supposed to be, when you're walking, you're supposed to be on the left side of the road facing traffic. We were doing the opposite thing. And we drove in a car, drove up by us, and I don't recall whether they slowed down or whatever, or if they rolled down the window and made remarks. I don't recall. However, the car went out of our sight, drove back on the opposite side, and obviously we were thinking that maybe that was a different car. We didn't know because it did. This time when they passed, they didn't roll down their windows and say anything. When they came back, and they actually got on the berm of the road, and they were driving towards us at high speed. And at that point in time, we literally jumped across the guardrail, and they drove by. And so we didn't return to the road. We just went out into the woods, and we saw the car pass two other times going. I'm thinking I forget the direction. It could be east towards Elkins and then come back west towards Buchanan. But that was a pretty scary time for me.
Yeah, thanks for your willingness to share that. And um, so uh, that I will repeat back that I heard you say that a really scary moment for you was when you and some friends um, had decided to walk back to the college and had someone try to uh, run you over with a vehicle and share some uh, slurs at you, which obviously were very scary for you. Um, and if I could use the follow up, how did you manage that? How did you manage that fear?
Mm, literally by jumping over the guardrail and running into the woods.
Gotcha.
Seriously,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
because
all right.
yeah, that was it. Okay, and after a while, we got back on the road, and uh, yeah, we got back on the road, and when we got to Buchanan, excuse me, Bealington, we got to Bealington, it was a little bit unnerving because that was the direction the car was going. So we had no idea whether or not somebody would be waiting in that town for us.
Sure. I have I have two. One that let me start with the first one. You mentioned that your wife is white. My first wife was Latino, and so it was interesting. She didn't know that she was Latino. Um, she didn't officially know that she was Latino until after we had married, and she was able to get in touch with her biological father, and turns out that he was. They'd always told her she was Italian, which her grandmother was full-blooded Italian. That's where she got the dark skin and what have you. But after reaching out to and getting in contact with her biological father, and her uncles and other family members, that was certainly a time when I was accepted and heard and valued in her family, her biological family. We had great relationships together. Another, if I can share two, the other was I lived in Dallas, Fort Worth for a few years, and the company that I worked there for, we had about 100 and some employees. A large majority of them were Hispanic. Smaller number of them were African American, and one of my close co-workers, one of my assistant managers, was African American, and he was the type of guy who would always, it felt like to me, he always appreciated me for who I was, not because of the position that I held. And I always felt like I had a good connection with him. An interesting, just a sidebar story, his grandmother passed away. And he was just, devastated. And he told me, he said, she was like my mom. And so when they had the funeral, I was able to go with another manager, and I went to the funeral. And as you mentioned, going to the political party, or walking into a place. We were in Oak Hill, South Dallas. I don't know if you're familiar with any of these demographics or not, but it's 99% Black. And for us to pull in there and to get out and to walk into the church, we had folks watching us real close. They came and sat down and sat with us, behind us, just to keep an eye on what was going on. And that continued until he came over, and we embraced in this big hug and cried on each other's shoulders. And then, everything was fine. And, just knowing that level of acceptance was going to be there from him, I think is what, gave me the courage to go into that situation that I knew it was not going to be a normal situation, and feel somewhat safe being there. So those are mine.
So was this person your you said he was an assistant manager. Was
Hmm.
he your assistant manager, or
Hmm.
so
Yes.
you were his boss?
I, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We were not quite on the same. We were both assistants, but yeah, we were.
Uh, that that
So
works for me. Works for
yeah.
me. So in your first marriage, you
Mhm.
were married to a person of Latino
Mhm.
descent, but
Mhm.
also uh, probably had some Italian
Mhm.
as well.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and you said that meeting her biological family, that they did accept you when you did meet them. And you also mentioned that in Texas that you worked at this plant, and there was a an assistant manager that you work with who was African American, and
Mhm.
a family member of his passed away, and that you went to the uh, funeral of this person. You went to the funeral of this person, and it was in a section of Texas that was predominantly lived in by people of color. And going to the church, uh, it was a situation that be, made you uncomfortable in the sense that, once again, the dominant amount of people there were people who are
Mhm.
people of color. However, you felt once your friend came and you all embraced that it gave you a sense of that you you were already accepted by him because otherwise you wouldn't have been there at that
Right.
service. At least I believe that's the case.
Yeah.
But also too that you felt like when the people who were outside your sphere in that church, they felt like, oh, okay, you belong.
Yeah.
There's two things, just as I think deeply about it. I'm invisible and I'm visible.
Okay.
And I'm taking this, this is from my personal experience, but also from a broader experience as a person with color.
Hmm.
I'm invisible because of the things that go on. So, for instance, there's things that happen uh, that I believe that white people do not totally understand or have a grip or even have a clue of what black people go through all of the time, 24 hours a day. So that's what I mean by invisible. Okay. You're visible because whenever you go somewhere, so for me personally, in the past, I'd go to the store and I'd be followed by people who are security people. Okay. When I was in college, I was about ready to board the plane to go to back to college from New Jersey, and this was before this was before terrorism. This was
Mm.
before terrorism. So this was back in the 70s. Okay. Uh, I was not allowed to board the plane. They took me off somewhere else and they questioned me. And I'm thinking, what is up with this? And I can't imagine, to this day, I'm not, well, I'm sure now what that was. And I probably was then. But so I'm saying that, for me, and the culture, the people who are people of color, we're invisible, we're ignored by the society, and the society as a whole doesn't care. Okay. But at the same time, we're very visible because we're very visible if we try to move into a neighborhood that is white, or if we go to a neighborhood that is white and there's no people of color to live there, you stand out and you're suspicious. Okay. So I look at myself as visible and invisible. So, and you don't have to repeat all this. I'm just telling you this. But this is true here in Morgantown. Okay. I'm a combination of visible and invisible here, which is okay. This in Morgantown, I feel safe, relatively safe. Okay, probably better than that. Okay. However, when I step outside of Morgantown and I go to a place like Cassville or anywhere western part of the county, or if I go into Preston County, which is the next county over, because out in those areas, there's hardly any people of color who live out there. And so I stick out. And so that is something that's unsettling for me. I remember, this is too long, but I'm going to throw this out. I've helped people campaign for different offices here in this area. And I went out with this one person who was a lawyer here in town. And I remember I was going with him. Now, obviously for him, it worked out fine because it turns out that he was white. Okay. But for me, it was a little bit unsettling. I'm thinking, even out with him, I didn't feel good about that. And so for me, campaigning outside of Morgantown, I know for me in the future, it's kind of like, no, I don't think I'll do that. So anyway, that was a long explanation.
No, that I appreciate that visible and invisible as a way of kind of wrapping your mind around something that might not have been a way for me to consider